Hello, welcome back to Algebra 1. Here we're going to solve some more equations that involve absolute value. What we're going to find are that these equations are going to require multiplication and division to solve, and so we'll be getting practice with that as well. So if you have 2 times the absolute value of x is 18, how do you think you go about solving that? Well, we want to get this all by himself, and we're multiplying it by 2. So what we need to do is do the opposite of multiplication, which is what? Division. So we'll divide the left-hand side by 2, and when we do that, we must do exactly the same thing to the right-hand side, which means we'll divide him by 2. Now you see you have a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom. They'll cancel, which just means they're dividing out. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So effectively, everything basically disappears there. And on the left-hand side, you still have the absolute value of x, and on the right-hand side, you have 18 divided by 2, which is 9. Now, you're not done because you haven't solved for x. You've solved for the absolute value of x. All right, so how do you figure out what x is? And I taught you before, when you get down to this point where you have the absolute value of your variable is equal to something, you have 2 solutions. The first one is that x is equal to 9, just like you'd think, but the other solution is that x is equal to -9. And both of these are valid solutions, which means that this equation, because it has an absolute value sign, has 2 valid answers. And that's because if you put 9 up here, absolute value of 9 is 9, times 2 is 18, so it works. If you put -9 in here, then the absolute value of -9 is also positive 9 times 2 gives you 18. So these two values both work and both satisfy the equation. So we'll just do a couple more to give you a little practice with this kind of idea. What if you have -7 times the absolute value of the variable t is equal to 21? Same sort of thing. We'll just take a second to write the equation again because now we need to do what? Division. Because here we're multiplying by -7. We need to get rid of that 7 by, let me just make this a little bit clear here. On the bottom we're going to have a -7 down here. We'll be dividing both sides by -7. Now on the left-hand side, the -7 on the top is going to cancel with the -7 on the bottom because they're dividing out. -7 divided by -7 is 1. So on the left-hand side, you're going to have the absolute value of t, and on the right-hand side, notice I made a mistake here. This should be 21. When I recopied the problem, should be a 21 here. What is 21 divided by -7? Well, 21 divided by 7 is 3, and since they're opposite signs, it's really going to be -3. Those come from the rules of division. Now, you're not done because you've solved for the absolute value of t, and you're saying that it's equal to -3. Now, here's where you have to do some thinking, okay? Over here, for instance, we knew that we could put a positive or a negative value in here and we would get a positive 9 out, right? Negative or positive 9 going in here gives us positive 9 because that's how absolute value works. But here, we're saying that the absolute value of some number is -3. There is no number that you can put in here. There's no value of t that you could stick in here and get a negative answer because absolute value always gives you a positive answer. No matter what you stick in here, you always get a positive answer. So if you ever get a situation where the absolute value of some variable is equal to a negative number, then what you have is the case where t has no solution. And this is probably, as far as I can tell, the first time in this class where we've had that kind of thing. The variable t has no solution. So you see, many times equations have one and only one solution, and we've solved many of those. Many times with absolute value, we have 2 solutions. When absolute value is equal to some positive number, we have 2 valid answers that we're going to work here. But here's the first case where we have an equation that has no solution. And when you go back to the original problem, you can kind of see that here. What you're trying to say is that -7 times some absolute value of a variable is going to give you a positive 21. There is no value of t that you can stick in here to make this equation work. Because no matter what you put inside of here, the absolute value is always going to give you a positive answer. Even if you put -94 in, you're going to get positive 94 out for this. So always a positive number times a negative number always gives you a negative number. You can never satisfy this. So this is an equation that you can write down, but it has no solution. And in science, that happens a lot. You might write an equation down, you know, because you're studying, you know, I don't know, how fast lava flows down a mountain or something, and then you write an equation and you can't solve it. And that may mean that maybe your equation's wrong, or it might mean that your problem doesn't really have a solution that you can solve for. So it happens sometimes, and so this is one of the cases where it happened here in our problems, and I wanted to show that to you. All right, now what if you have absolute value of x, going to the next problem, divided by 5 is equal to 3. How do you handle that? We want to get this absolute value of x all by himself. So let me recopy the problem just so we don't clutter up what we're originally doing. Let me take this away actually. Equals 3. Now what we have here is basically a 5 on the bottom. So we're doing division. So to get rid of the 5, we're going to multiply both sides by 5. Now you see what you have here, because there's always an implied, when 5 can be written as 5 over 1, it's on the top basically. So when you have a number on the top and the bottom of a fraction like that, even though they're multiplied, you can do it that way, because what's going to happen when you multiply this is going to be the 5 times the absolute value of x is on the top, and then this times the 1 is going to be on the bottom. So the 5 is on the top of the fraction, the 5 is on the bottom of the fraction, they divide away, they disappear. And so, or they give you 1, and so they look to disappear. And so the absolute value of x is all you have left. 3 times 5 on the right is 15. And you might say, I'm done. But you're not done, because you have the absolute value of a variable is equal to positive 15. So there's two values that work. X is equal to 15 and x is equal to negative 15. Those two values, when you stick them in there, into here, you'll get the positive 15 back. And so that works. Notice in the previous example, you got down to the end and you figured out the absolute value was equal to a negative number, which meant there was no solution possible. Here, it's equal to a positive number. You have two solutions. So in general, that's what's going to happen. Now we have one final one that we want to talk about, and that would be 5 times the absolute value of some variable c divided by 3 is equal to 10. Now there's lots of different ways you can do this problem. I'm going to solve it a way that I'll show you. Let me recopy the problem just so that we make sure that we have room here. So we have two problems here. We have the 3 in the denominator and we have a 5 in the numerator. So let's focus on the 3 in the denominator first. How do we get rid of him? We can multiply both sides of the equation by 3. And when we do that, the 3 on the top will cancel with the 3 on the bottom. So on the left, all you're going to have is, I'll go over here to continue, we're going to have 5 times the absolute value of c, and on the right-hand side, this is 10 times 3, is going to be 30. Okay, now we have 5 times absolute value of c is equal to 30. How do we get rid of the 5? Well, that's multiplication, so we're going to do division. We'll divide both sides by 5. The 5 on the top will cancel with the 5 on the bottom. When I say cancel, I just mean they divide. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So the 1 effectively looks like it disappears. Really, the absolute value of c is the only thing left over there. On the right-hand side, 30 divided by 5 is 6. So again, you're not done, because what you've said is that the absolute value of c is equal to 6, a positive number 6. So that means there's two answers here. C can equal 6, and c can also equal negative 6. Those are the two values. And if you take them and you stick them in the original problem, it makes sense. If you put 6 in here, then absolute value of 6 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. 30 divided by 3 is 10. That works out. Now if you put negative 6 in here, what's the absolute value of negative 6? That's going to give you a positive 6. Again, times 5 is 30. 30 on top divided by 3 is 10. So both values work. And that's what you're trying to look for when you check your work in algebra, is that you satisfy the equation. So make sure you can solve these problems. Follow me on to the next section, where we're going to continue solving equations that are a little more complicated and require multiple steps.